Hi family, I'm back. I'm so sorry I've been gone for several months. I've just had so much going on personally. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I wanted to jump on here and do a video of the astrology of what I was seeing, but I just haven't had time and I'm so sorry. Things are starting to slow down for me personally, so that I'm hoping I can do at least a couple of videos a week to get us prepared, because the energy is just really going to start changing crazily here in April. So I want to start first with tomorrow, March 30th, 2026. Today's the 29th, of course. And I want to show you that Venus is going to be moving home into Taurus. And remember, in home here, she feels extremely comfortable. It's like staying in a 4-star hotel, right? However, we have to remember that here, she's also very bullheaded. And she's going to double down, and she'll want things exactly how she's feeling. And I'm saying this because her mindset of how she's feeling is going to depend upon where the sun is in transit, which is her ego, and where Mercury is in transit, her mindset, as well as where the moon is at, which controls her feelings. And so all this is going to be kind of a combination of the sun, Mercury, and Mars when she moves into Taurus. And the reason why this is important to kind of look at is um, we still have the sun, of course, is going to be in Aries as well. So it's going to be ready to start for action, right? But Mercury, thank God, is now going direct, but it's still in Pisces. So it's still feeling confined like a prisoner by the not knowing. So it's like we're still sleepwalking. The mind recognizes that things are not good, but it doesn't really have the answers of what to do. So we can become very vulnerable to the schemers and the fraudsters. So we have to, be aware of that. So be very vigilant and careful about what you're watching, what you're hearing, um, because you're going to see an amped up propaganda campaign happen. Um, Now, the moon is going to be in Virgo, so we are going to be able to compartmentalize a little bit better our feelings, and we'll be able to control those better. Um, Even as well as that's going to help of what we say. But we still have to be really careful, okay? Because when the moon, it moves every 2.5 days. So when the moon goes from Virgo into Libra, we're going to find more balance, right? Because, again, with Venus being home in Taurus, we're going to have this uh, wonderful balance between the moon and Venus. And then in Scorpio, we might go back to being confused about our feelings and how we're feeling. And then when it gets to Sag, we might start actually getting angry, right? Because it's fire. And that anger might actually go out of control. And with Mercury being in Pisces still, we might actually say things that we wish we hadn't. So we have to be really careful with our words um, when the moon does go into Sagittarius later on in the week, okay? So I want to give you a heads up on that, and that will be April 6th when the moon enters into Sag. Okay, now I want to talk about April 8th. And we have this sextile conjunction happening that is really insane. And it's Mars at 29 degrees in Pisces, Uranus 29 degrees in Taurus. And this, in the governmental chart, the constitutional chart that I've really been evaluating, Uranus is going to be directly over their IC in their natal chart, which is the fourth house. Um, and the last time we kind of saw this conjunction with their IC and Uranus was June 14 through the 16, 2025. And this is when they dropped a 30,000-pound bomb onto Fordo, Iran, in their genocidal tagline called Operation Midnight Hammer. So this is what was the start of what we are now calling the 12-day war they did. So I just want you to be aware of it, because both of these planets are going to be at 29 degrees, and we call this in astrology the anaretic degree, which is extremely volatile and dangerous. It is fated, but it can really expand out of control very quickly. So I just want you to be aware of that. And Mars and Uranus on the 8th and 9th, this is in an aspect we call a sextile. And so the energy that flows back and forth from the planets is going to be really easy. It's going to actually be like a runaway freight train, right? So I just want you to be very aware of this. And, you know, I'm certainly not predicting that things are going to... Um, it's hard not to see the escalation, I guess is what I'm saying. So I just want you to be prepared. Um, and America and Iran seem to have this historical heightened clash every time that we see this particular aspect alignment happen. Now, of course, Trump has taken it to a whole new level that we have never seen before until last June. Um, and this last alignment that's coming, this will be the last alignment of Mars in Pisces and Uranus in Taurus that we'll see in our lifetime. So this last alignment aspect may become even more violent and volatile than we've ever seen yet. Okay? Um, Especially when Mars, because there's this dance that's going to happen on between the 8th and the 9th, is that Mars then moves into Aries, right? Um, and Aries, you know, Mars in Aries is going to be home, and it's going to feel like Mars feels like he's a god and he can do whatever he wants, right? Now, I've determined that because we know they've broken the Constitution multiple times, as well as I actually found where the first time our Constitution was broke was back in 1798. Thanks, Trump, for giving me the heads up on that, when he came out and enacted the Alien and Sedition Act. That, by scholars, is determined the first time our Constitution was broken. In fact, a lot of scholars argue that it's been broken by every president in some way ever since, and that no one's ever been held accountable. So I want to give you a heads up, since we know for a fact Trump has been breaking the Constitution and the rule of law. I want to give you a heads up of how Mars acts in Pisces. And that is that it sabotages themselves by not taking responsibility. Often there is a tendency to disconnect from reality, which we're seeing, right? We've been seeing. So Mars in Aries in shadow becomes impulsive and acts without thinking, which then leads to mistakes, which then acerbates the entire situation. So I just want you to be aware of this, that we've got something coming. And, you know, with Uranus, as we always say in astrology, expect the unexpected. So I also wanted to note that the last time we saw, prior to June 17, 2025, Mars at 29 degrees Pisces and Uranus 29 degrees Taurus, was July 1st, 1941. So what happened on this day, right? Well, President Roosevelt froze the assets of Japan, which now many scholars have said since that this laid the groundwork and the path for the Japanese to devise a plan to retaliate against us. And so 5 months later, they attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. So I was curious, where was Mars and Uranus when they attacked us, right? And Mars was at 15 degrees Aries and Uranus was at 27 degrees Taurus. So I wanted to know, okay, so because we have these planets getting ready to move, right? Um, the end of April, Uranus will move out of Taurus finally and be out of it for 84 years. So in my lifetime, I'll never see it back here, and most of us won't. But so I wanted to know what was the closest this alignment was going to be for us, when, and I mean, you just can't make this up. April 26, 2026 is when Mars will be at 12 degrees Aries, Uranus at 29 degrees in Taurus. Now, again, back on December 7th, 1941, Mars was at 15 degrees and Uranus was at 27 degrees. So there is a little bit of a difference, but it's pretty similar. So real quick, I'm just showing you, this was the night of June 14th through the 16th when they did the midnight, whatever, grotesque task, right? So I'm just showing you that the government's natal charts I see is at 28 degrees 56 minutes. And this is at midnight. I threw this chart at midnight on the 14th. And this is when they dropped that bomb on Iran, which was at 28:50. So I'm just showing you, holy cow. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up, of how history can repeat itself, right? So I'm going to show you Iran's chart, just so you have an idea. Their Mars is in Pisces, and, you know, as you can see, it's conjunct Mercury retrograde in Pisces. And then I just want you to see that Jupiter's in Cancer at 29 degrees, and Jupiter in Cancer is an exaltation. So this is the governmental chart I've been using, which is the Constitution. This is what they've been operating under. I've been following them for 2 years now. Not only are they operating under, not only was Joe Biden operating under this, but Trump is operating on this. The only difference is they are pulling the shadow energy of this chart. So I just want to make a note of that. And so again, on April 8th, with this volatile energy of Mars and Uranus, it's also going to be along the ascendant and descendant line at 29 degrees with the lot of fortune. And a lot of fortune is the X with the circle. And at 11 degrees in Aries, Iran's sun is at 11 degrees in Aries. So I would not be surprised if the Trump regime strikes Iran again, and also with boots on the ground, since Mars is in the 9th house of foreign countries. But this will be a huge mistake, because their natal Jupiter will defend themselves. And when I'm talking about whose natal Jupiter, I'm talking about Iran that I just mentioned. And Iran's VX, and VX is a vortex. And it is where we often associate how do I put this? Kind of, well, it's, I don't know how to explain a vortex. Okay, so vortex is like a predestined event. It's like fated, right? So this is why it's real important that I bring this up. So what we would see is if they strike them, this is going to be a huge mistake, because their natal Jupiter will defend themselves, and Iran's vortex is at 15 degrees Gemini in the 8th house. The U.S. Chiron is 13 degrees Gemini, which does indicate a loss of children, because remember, the 5th house, we see children. And in addition, Mars moves into Aries on the 9th. Aries and Aquarius rule Iran, and their IC is 5 degrees Aquarius, and Pluto is now 5 degrees in Aquarius. So our secret military power is the VX at 6 degrees in the 8th house of Virgo, and the South Node is at 7 degrees Virgo. So in transit, when the Trump regime attacked in February 28 after the solar eclipse, but not far from the lunar eclipse, moon that happened, right, in Pisces, this lunar eclipse greatly affected their 8th house. What I have been viewing is that it caused a massive power outage of their Mercury, their Venus, and their vortex. In addition, Mars at 29 degrees in Pisces could reactivate the solar eclipse. Pisces at 29 degrees from March 20th, 2015. This eclipse was the beginning of Trump's rise in popularity in politics. So if this eclipse is reactivated, it would be his end to his popularity. Eclipses often bring endings when reactivated. And because this was a 29-degree eclipse, I believe this is his ending. And again, 29 degrees is fated. It's destiny. And because of what we're already seeing, this is why I'm bringing this in. I just want you guys to know. So here's that chart of March 20th, 2015, the total solar eclipse in Pisces at 29 degrees. And as you can see, in Leo in his first house, or I'm sorry, Leo is his first house, and his AC is at 29 degrees. This chart is of that day. It's not his. It's not his natal chart. I'm sorry. So what this does is it forms a quincunx, what we call quincunx or inconjunct aspect. Therefore, in 2015, this would have given him a power surge, and it is reactivated. It would be, if it's reactivated, it would be a massive power outage. And what this would be a power outage to is his AC, which is how the world sees you. His natal Mars at 27 degrees, therefore, would also be taken out. His natal Sun is at 22 degrees in Gemini in the 11th house, which is his life ruling planet, which is Uranus at 17 degrees in Gemini. Therefore, he will begin to lose friends, group memberships, social media, social support, hopes, and dreams. In addition, let's not forget that Uranus rules the electrical system of the body. So we could see massive medical implications of that, caused by a power outage of the electrical system, or in fact, it could be a short circuit, right? Okay, and so I'm not talking about everything that's going on. I'm talking about the things that I think are going to be really important for us to pay attention to. Okay, on April 13, 2026, Mars will conjunct Neptune in Aries. And the last time this conjunction happened in history was back during the Civil War. It happened about 8 times during the Civil War due to the retrograding of the planets. So overall, this could bring major issues with gas, as Aries rules energy, Mars rules combustion engines, and Neptune rules petroleum. Now, the government's Pisces is the second house, so it is what they value. For we the people in the natal chart, it is our 4th house. So I think it will affect our home foundation and roots. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a civil war because of this aspect having happened last time. I'm just telling you the energy that it brings. And, I guess we have to really understand what the Civil War was truly about, to understand. And really, let's be clear here. What it was about was the government was putting pressure upon the southern states that they had to, you know, follow the things they wanted them to follow. And the southern states got mad and said, no, we're not going to do it. And in fact, if you start really going and looking at the history of what the people thought, and I'm not just talking about the people of the South, I'm talking about people across the entire country as well as the North, they had great sympathy for the people of the South. Um, and I'm not getting into all the elements because it was way more than just the one thing that we learned about in college or in high school or college. It was way beyond slavery. I mean, there was a lot of economic issues going on, and as we can see right now, this is what is driving people to be angry. You know, more people are angry about the rise in cost of food and goods than they are that our own government is committing 2 genocides right now or more. So, just leaving that right there. So, overall, this conjunction of Mars and Neptune kind of will bring an energy that can ignite passion and action, but it can also lead to scattered focus, an illusion or aimless wandering of not really understanding what's going on. This could blur the lines between desires and dreams. It's important to know that we might see um, not only gas problems as far as our cars, but any kind of petroleum, right? Any kind of um, energy. So I'm just giving you a heads up to be prepared for that and make accommodations. We could also see problems, which is already being talked about, in fertilizer. In fertilizers. So again, there could be some shortage of certain foods. There could be shortage, of having the fertilizer to grow certain foods. So I just want you to be aware of that and, do what you can to kind of stock up a little bit and prepare yourself. That way you're not taken into a great shock, right? So again, I looked at the last time this happened, and there was a partial solar, the last time this happened, there was a partial solar eclipse on February 21st, 1841. Um, and the interesting thing that happened at this time frame of this eclipse and that carried on for several months was that we actually had 3 different presidents that occurred. So that was kind of interesting. And then the partial lunar eclipse happened on August 26, 1961, which the USS Hiroshima warship of ours got recommissioned because it had been put out to pasture and it got recommissioned to operate for helicopters for transporting Marines. So I just want you to be aware of that. So these are kind of the themes that go with this energy, just so that we have an idea. We rhyme a lot with history, so that's why I'm bringing this into this reading with so that you kind of have an idea of some things we could see. Now, this was not an exact of what's happening now, but it certainly is pretty damn close on the aspects of the conjunction. And then here I'm just showing you that in 1841, John Tyler became America's first unelected president following the death of William Henry Harrison. Um, and Tyler shocked the nation by fully assuming presidential powers rather than serving as a temporary acting president. So, I'm just, showing you some of what the crazy stuff that happened the last time Neptune and Mars were in Aries together. And this is just again to show you how they're using the dark energy. This is when they did that Midnight Hammer operation, and I just want to show you the inner chart is their natal chart, the government, and the outer chart are the transits. And just so you can understand how they're using the dark energy of the planets and the zodiacs to do what they're doing. And I'm not even saying they're consciously doing this. I'm saying by them breaking the Constitution, this is the effect that is happening. The cause would be they broke the Constitution. The effect is they're getting the dark energy of the Constitution. So I'm just showing that to you. On this day, it was also exposed of how the entire system of voting is not only being misrepresented by our government, by both parties, but exactly how an election can be stolen. And this is not incompetence, this is actually by design. So I'm going to show you a clip.
Our viewers of a top line of how strange the Pennsylvania election looked in 2024 presidential.
Absolutely. And we actually have an example of it if we do get to any visuals. The concern we were finding is all across Pennsylvania. We looked at every county in the state. This is in our lawsuit. And we did a election forensic analysis, which is based on the type of analysis experts have been doing and put out papers for. We cite 3 different experts, Roman Udot, Sergei Shulkin, and Peter Klimek, and they've all wrote and published independent papers looking at Russian elections and other elections across the world and using these methods. So we said, let's take their methods and let's apply them to the U.S. And our methods use turnout as one of the evaluations, and I'm sure everyone's heard of turnout here as a number. But really what we're highlighting in our analysis is we're saying, what are these experts saying is normal when it comes to human voting behavior? And generally, normal looks like voters, there's not a relationship between how much turnout there is in a county or precincts and any one candidate winning, which I know is kind of hard to maybe envision. But the way it should work, based on what these experts have found and documented, is that on average, across all levels of turnout in a county, both candidates should be somewhat consistent. We shouldn't see any sharp changes. We shouldn't see a really strong relationship. And what our analysis shows is we are finding that in precincts of the highest turnout, most of the time in Pennsylvania, it's 60% and higher. We begin to see a really strong relationship and almost a crossing or a change where the Republican candidates for president begin to get more of the votes in places of higher turnout. And this is strange to see. This doesn't match what these experts say they should expect in a normal election. And it actually mirrors some concerns that have been made public about Russian elections where places of higher turnout were accused, and the Russian government was accused of potentially stuffing ballots, causing turnout to rise. I mean, we actually kind of document that effect here on the right if you have the graphic. So our analysis is just showing that pattern where we actually recently did an analysis of Canada, their 2025 federal election. And we kind of asked the question, well, how does Canada run their elections? And that's on the left where we're looking at turnout on the x-axis and the amount of votes or the percentage of votes candidates are getting on the y-axis. And they have multiple parties, by the way. And we just pretty much said, what does Canada's results look like? And we actually see what that more normal voting behavior should look like, where these experts say, in this case, the colors are switched because the liberal and conservatives do the opposite colors, but the conservatives and the liberals are both pretty consistent across all levels of turnout, even though the liberals won. So what's interesting is we asked that question, well, how do they run their elections any differently than we do? And that's where we have made public at this point. We put out a report for Canada where Canada hand counts their elections. They don't use digital voting systems in these recent elections.
And that's really, that's what any election security expert across the board, some of you have different thoughts about, different things and different analyses. But one thing I think you all agree on across this space is hand counted paper ballots. That is the gold standard. That's really the only way to avoid the potential of technological, at least, manipulation, right?
Yeah, the concern is definitely, as we've looked into the systems we use, in the US for the 24 election. Most people don't even realize this, but 70% of the US is using like two major voting system brands. And we're always told by officials every state runs their own elections. So it would be really difficult to mess with things. Well, the problem is we're using some of the same systems across multiple counties and multiple states. And as we've looked into those systems, I'm sure you're familiar, there are some vulnerabilities and some red flags that have been made public by independent experts, on top of the things we're finding as well. So I think the main pushback we get is the systems aren't connected to the internet. That's what we're told time and time again. I'm sure you heard of that, right? When we're
Not
told
true.
this,
No.
well,
See, another Susan Greenhall. I spoke to her at DEF CON. You met her as well, election security expert for free speech for people. That was one of her biggest gripes, biggest misconceptions that she wanted us to correct, is that writ large, across the board, internet election systems are not connected to the internet.
yeah, I actually met. So at this point, I believe I've met with at least 4 different Secretary of State staff across the U.S. Some of the swing states, some of the non-swing states, and I've had this conversation with them where we're bringing up our analysis. We're seeking investigations. We're looking at we want to look at the paper records and compare them to the digital reports. And during that conversation, they tell us, well, our systems aren't connected to the internet anyway, so it would be very difficult to mess with this. And in the next sentence, I ask, how are you sending your reports? How are you sending your data on election night from the precincts to the county? And you know what they say?
How? What?
They're saying, oh, well, we have cellular modems and we send unofficial reports using cellular modems on election night. And so I guess the question I ask is, are our cell phones connected to the internet? Right? So you're telling me our systems are secure, but in the next sentence, you don't realize that if it's got a cellular modem in them, that is a potential vulnerability that we're not being told about and actually has been on multiple occasions documented and warned. I know CISA put out a report warning about that level of risk when having cellular modems in some of our scanners. At this point, I think back in 2019, Vice did a report, and they actually kind of went around and did an analysis, and they found over 33,000 ES&S scanners, which is one of the largest voting system brands we use to process our votes across the U.S. and the swing states. They found them with modems online and across 11 different states, and they found at least 35 connected election systems. So when it comes to like cybersecurity, this just blows my mind, to be honest. That was my background. That's my background at this point. Cybersecurity, information systems. I have a degree in network security. I worked for the military as a 25 Bravo computer tech specialist. And it blows my mind that we're not really doing the due diligence when it comes to our election infrastructure, which I think is probably the most important systems we have in the U.S.
So this kind of reiterates November 5th election day chart. The inner chart is their natal chart, the government, and the outer chart is transits. And as you can see, remember, Uranus rules elections. Now, there are obviously other players in this. That's what I have highlighted of what was going on. And for this chart, you can see the natal chart on the inside is Joe Biden's own natal chart, and then on the outside in the green is the transits of the day. So as you can see, the sun was home in Scorpio, and Biden's sun is in Scorpio, and his life-ruling planet is Venus. Venus was in transit in Sagittarius at 23 degrees, and the ruler of Joe Biden's chart is Jupiter. Jupiter in his chart is at 25 degrees in retrograde. Jupiter in transit was at 25 degrees retrograde in Gemini. So that was that semi-sextile. And again, I'm just going to show you that this is Joe Biden's chart, but I wanted to make a note that, just to remind you, the U.S. government natal chart is an Aquarius rising. Therefore, it's ruled by Uranus, who rules elections, and Saturn, who rules hidden things. Their life planet is also Venus. That day in transit, Venus was over their 11th house in Sagittarius, which this house rules the internet. Uranus in transit that day was at a 3-degree orb from their natal IC, which is the 4th house. this kind of shows you what I just said. And the Sun in transit was conjunct the MC in transit, giving the power to the current leader over the elections at home. In addition, their secret power, X with the circle, was conjunct Saturn retrograde in Pisces of the second house, thereby giving them the superpower to hide what was being done, which was trine to the Sun and MC in transit. In addition, it was in opposition of their Mercury in the 8th house of Virgo, which Mercury rules. So, if you look at all three of these charts, and I apologize they're so small, but it's the only way I could fit them all on this presentation. But if you look at Joe Biden, the first chart, the second one is Donald Trump, and the third one being Kamala Harris, it's important to know that Trump winning the election was not done by we the people. This was in fact done, you can see this when you lay out all these charts. This was in fact done with manipulation of who had the power that day. And so Biden, as he was president. The 6th house is about subordinates in the workplace. Uranus rules elections. Taurus rules securities and money. And remember, Venus is the government's life ruler. Venus was over Biden's 1st house, Trump's 5th house, and Harris's 7th house. If you look at Jupiter, who rules Sag and is the great benefic, when Harris should have won, especially when you're talking about good fortune and luck. She had this semi-sextile happening. She had the greatest luck with Jupiter for this day, plus Uranus and Venus are in her 4th house, which would have represented us, we the people. So yes, we the people picked her, but something hidden happened, and it couldn't have happened without the help of the current president of the time, which was Joe Biden. In fact, with Mars over Biden's 9th house, he had the power that day to decide who to crown, especially with a conjunction with his natal Pluto. Remember, Pluto is about destroying the system and rebuilding. Trump and Biden were in absolute lock and step on this, with both having Pluto in Leo. Harris, however, has her Pluto in Virgo, conjunct Venus in the 4th house. So she would have done what the people wanted. Does this make sense? Hopefully you're following me on this. And Trump even came out and said, here's our proof. So I'm going to show you this clip of this video that it seems like we all have forgotten about. It's a small club, and we ain't part of it, nor are our voices, our votes, being truly counted. There is no red or blue with this government. It's all an illusion. They are working together.
Make the best show on the planet ever, and we'll do it together, Mr. President.
Oh, that's great. I love what he said, like 3 Super Bowls a day for a month. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
That's really amazing when you think of it. I've never heard that expressed. That's a lot. When we made this, it was made during my term, my first term, and it was so sad because I said, can you imagine I'm not going to be president? And that's too bad. And then what happened is they rigged the election and I became president. So that was a good thing. That was a good thing. That was quite an achievement for both of us. So I'll be president during the World Cup and during the Olympics, which we were very instrumental in getting. And then, of course, we have our 250th birthday, too, and of that I wasn't instrumental. That just happened to fall on the same time. So we have those three big events, and that's too bad. And what happened is they rigged the election and I became president. So that was a good thing.
And I don't want you to just be mad at Biden or Trump. Harris went along with it. And as you know, she's refused to do any recount of the ballots. So what does that say? The dark energy that was used was in fact being used to manipulate the votes against we the people. You can see this very, very, very clearly if you truly examine the Declaration of Independence chart versus the U.S. Constitutional chart. And as I've showed you, you can even go down further, you can drill down further, and you can see it when you look at Biden, Trump, and Harris's chart all together. And here again, this is the constitutional chart versus the transits of the day for November 5th, 2024, when we voted. And here is our chart, the Declaration of Independence, we the people, versus the transits of November 5th, 2024. So, I'm trying to show you that, again, they're working in, I'm not saying all of the players in the government are all working together. I'm just saying it's very clearly, you can start seeing now who is working together if you pay attention, if you're subtle and really pay attention. It's very apparent that, and I'm not accusing Harris of, in fact, even knowing that this was happening, right? But for whatever reason, whether they bought her off or they threatened her, she has went along with it and refused to recount the votes. But it's very, very clear that we voted for her, and she would have done what we wanted her to do. She would have listened to our voices. Whereas you can clearly see that Trump and Biden were working together. So there you go. So I hopefully will do another video. I'm going to try to keep these rolling. Anyway, I hope you have a fabulous Sunday, and I will put together my notes that I have for the remainder of April to show you. But I think we really need to chomp on these two videos that I just shared with you and what has transpired, and we need to really, as Mars moves into Aries, we really need to rethink. I wouldn't say do anything yet. We need to wait until Mercury gets out of Pisces, which is coming up, and then we, need to come up with a plan of what to do, I guess. Anyway, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Have a great Sunday.